Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. Guys, we got a really good show for you today. It's actually titled, Is There Another Side of Addiction? So before I introduce my guest, I just want to give out a huge shout out to Dave and Susan Kenny with Emergo Academy. You guys hear me talk about this every week. Emergo Academy is actually where I got certified as a crisis and recovery coach. However, these guys are a lot more than that. So even if you're not looking at wanting to be a certified crisis and recovery coach, just taking their course, which is about the brain first approach, is a course that I think a lot of people should take. You guys have heard me say this many, many times. If it wasn't for the training that I took with these guys last year, a lot of you know my 2025 was filled with a lot of challenges. I don't know if I would have made it through the way that I did. First of all, thank God for all that, but also thank my coaching for all the stuff that they helped me with. So if you guys are interested in checking them out, go to Emergo, that's Emergo Academy.com. Again, check them out, see what their brain first approach is all about. And I don't know, reach out to them. They're happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. So again, thank you, Emergo Academy, for sponsoring the show. And I love your support and kindness. So thank you very much. So today, again, we're going to be talking about, is there another side of addiction, with our guest, Garret Biss. Garret, thank you so much for reaching out to me and, being interested in coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity and I love the work that you're doing, just trying to bring some authentic conversations to the things that people contend with in their lives and try to bring some insight and hopefully some hope and some support that can help people navigate some difficult challenges in their own lives. And I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I've been excited all week actually for this conversation. And before we get started, I just also want to say thank you. Thank you for your service. I know you're an ex-Marine pilot. I just want to say thank you for all your support and giving all of us, the opportunity to be free and speak our mind. And you guys are the true heroes in my eyes. A lot of people have sports people that are their heroes, but for me, it's the people who protect our country. They're my heroes. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You betcha. So you and we were talking here right before the show, and I mentioned a few different titles. You said, the second or third one is pretty good, but I was thinking right before I came on about this one, and it was, is there another side of addiction? And that one really hit me also because, the show is called The Other Side of Addiction. So can you explain a little bit what made you come up with that?
Yeah, I thought it'd be a fun topic to kind of delve into. So I guess maybe to set the stage, one of the challenges that I see, and I think something that can create a barrier or some frustration or challenges in individuals that have struggled or suffered or have loved ones that have suffered, is really understanding what addiction is. If you ask 100 people what's addiction, you're going to get it at least 100 different answers. Every book that you open might describe it a little bit differently. Of all the definitions that I've read and of all the people that have responded to that question, there's one definition that really stands out to me, at least, as the best definition describing what exactly addiction is. I love the definition as it's offered by Dr. Gabor Mate. He describes addiction as manifest in any behavior that a person craves, finds temporary relief or pleasure in, suffers a negative consequence as a result of, yet has difficulty giving it up. I really love that definition. So I run an addiction recovery residence. It's a nonprofit. I spend a lot of time speaking in the community, trying to bring awareness to the service that we provide individuals. And that also means I spend a lot of time talking to people that don't think much about addiction or really understand what it is or the importance of the ways that you can support individuals in their recovery. So I always share that definition because one of the things it does to me, it provides a very comprehensive understanding of all the nuanced and the many faceted ways that addiction might show up in somebody's life. He doesn't talk about a specific substance or a behavior. He talks about it manifesting in any behavior. And I think this is important because addiction doesn't just occur with this arbitrary short list of substances and behaviors that we might commonly think of, addiction. It's not just with opioids. It's not just with alcohol. It's not just with, marijuana. It's not just with cocaine. Addiction can manifest in a lot of other ways, especially when you look at something that an individual craves in order to relieve some kind of pain that they're feeling. There's a lot of socially acceptable addictions or manifestations of this behavior. Somebody who's a workaholic, or somebody who, has a problematic relationship with food, or with partners of of their romantic interest. These tend to be more socially acceptable, but to me, it all comes back to this thing. What is something that somebody is craving, creating a negative consequence in their life as a result of, and they're having a challenge giving it up? The other thing I really think this humanizes, and that's why I use this definition so much, because it really humanizes this experience of addiction. I think that it is naturally a part of the human experience. Now, for some individuals, their addiction manifests in something that has much more severe consequences, much stronger addictive hooks or claws that really grab a hold of somebody's life. But I think that every human being at some point in their life has turned to something external to their body in order to create or synthesize some feeling or response inside of them. And I think that's at the root of the way that all of these behaviors manifest. It's seeking something outside of us in order to create or synthesize some feeling inside of us. And yes, for some individuals, that manifests terribly in the problematic relationship with alcohol or with opioids. But I think every human has had an experience in their life where they've reached for something outside of them. So when I think of addiction, I think of, the many ways that it can manifest. I love sharing this definition in the community because there's a lot of people that are like, oh, they other individuals who have struggled with an addiction or been diagnosed with a substance or an alcohol use disorder. And really, I share this because I want to help connect people to more to that experience. It's not like, oh, I haven't experienced that, so therefore I don't know anything about it, therefore I don't really understand it. I think in many ways, all of us have experienced, some form of this. So I like how that humanizes it. Also, it brings some clarity, and I think that's kind of what inspired this topic for today. Is if addiction is something that manifests in any behavior that provides temporary relief of pain, then what's the other side of that behavior look like? What's the other side of this manifestation look like? I don't think that it's simply the removing of a substance or a behavior. I don't think it's simply changing some beliefs, changing some habits, changing some lifestyle things. I think if there is another side of this, this spectrum of the severity of how addictions might manifest, the other side of addiction might be reconnecting with an understanding of what are the drivers, what is the source of the pain that is making you reach for something outside of your body, and what is the cost or the consequence, and being mindful of the relationship between not just the drivers to the substance, but also the cost that it has. And then being also mindful of making the decisions, not and kind of not shaming yourself. So one of the personal experiences I had that kind of drove this home for me was so in earlier in my recovery journey, as I was becoming more aware of and really, analyzing like what are the different drivers that drive individuals, toward a substance or behavior. That's another thing. You can ask, what is addiction and get many different answers. You can ask what causes addiction and get a whole another long list of answers. To the best of what I've been able to discern from everybody's responses, it's the best we know is that it's some combination of biological, sociological, spiritual, the whole biopsychosocial, spiritual spectrum. There's something in there that happened in somebody's life or something that didn't happen in somebody's life, and this created some internal pain or something that was requiring relief of. I also understand that of all the individuals in America, there's estimated about 40 million adults that struggle with some kind of problematic substance or behavior, struggling such that it's creating negative consequences in their life that they don't desire, yet they're not able to change it. I believe that's not one pathway into that darkness or into that struggle with a substance or behavior. If there's 40 million individuals struggling, I think it's 40 million different unique pathways, unique combinations of elements from this biopsychosocial spiritual that define that person's life experience, some of the things that they witness, some of the things that, some of the other contributing factors. And I think that's important point to make because then it's more clear to me at least that there's not one solution to this internal struggle. There's not one solution to solving this relationship with the problematic behavior. If there's 40 million different potential pathways into the darkness, then there's not going to be one or 10 or 100 or 1,000 pathways out of it. Heck, there might be as many as 40 million different pathways out of it, 40 million different combinations of the right tools, resources, clinical protocols, community elements that can help somebody get from that darkness. And if that darkness is defined as this behavior that you're relying on in order to emotionally survive in many ways, in order to heal that pain that's inside of you, then I think the other side of that experience is what that recovery might look like for somebody is moving is gaining control and gaining awareness of the driving factors that are leading somebody to want to numb or avoid or escape, and being more mindful and in control of the consequences that come with it. So back to the one experience that I had in my recovery journey. So I had removed some substances and behaviors in my life. I started to gain more awareness of kind of my own human experience and some of the things that drove me to seeking certain substances or behaviors in the past. And I thought everything was going pretty well. And then one Friday evening, I had my daughter, and she was with me for the night. We had plans. We were going to probably go out to dinner and go see a movie. And then at the last minute, she gets an invitation to go hang out with another friend. So I drop her off. We take care of that. And then I'm sitting there and it's Friday night. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? I send a couple text messages to friends to see what's going on, see if anybody wanted to get together, and nobody responded. And in a few minutes, I went from, feeling okay to all these internal gremlins and demons of, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, nobody likes you. Oh, you have no, there's no connections out there. Nobody wants to hang out with you. Started to kind of, flood to the surface. And then my initial response was like, oh my gosh, I need to go get a milkshake. I'm going to go and get some ice cream. I want to go get a cigar and go, smoke a cigar. And what I realized is, so two big things kind of came away from that for me was, oh, there's still something in there that's driving me to want to seek some external mechanism to avoid and escape. And the more that I've learned about what addictive substances and behaviors do on our body, the more I understand that it operates on a pathway that can become a mechanism to kind of heal some of the internal emotional challenges that we might be facing. I've also come to understand that it's not just some short list of substances and behaviors. It's not just alcohol. It's not just marijuana. It's not just cocaine or opioids that can become addictive. Really, it can be anything that we're seeking outside of our body. The same dopamine pathways that certain substances act on are also acted on by sugar, by salts, by nicotine in certain ways. So I started to recognize this in myself, and I was like, and then with a moment of clarity and kind of and some hindsight looking back on it, I was like, oh, that's what happened. There was some internal gremlin, there was some internal wound that was triggered or agitated a little bit in this situation, and that's where this sudden, out of nowhere craving to go get some ice cream, go get some sugar, go get some salt, go get some nicotine, where that came from. And it also, the other thing that I took away from this was, well, I did go get a milkshake. I don't think I got a cigar that night, but also I understood where it came from. And then the next day, I also didn't hang the guilt or the remorse or the shame over myself. It was like, hey, you were kind of aware of where this came from. You did the best that you could in the time. Things could have been a lot worse. You didn't go get 2 gallons of ice cream and sit home on your couch and and sulk about it, and you made a decision to just go ahead and indulge anyway and allow this substance or behavior. So to me, if there is another side of addiction, I think that's more indicative of what it is. It's not an attempt to permanently remove every potentially addictive substance or behavior in our life. It's to gain a better understanding of what are the drivers, where do these cravings come from, what's the source of the pain inside of us or the wound inside of us that's lingering from past experiences, from biological influences, from past traumas. What's the source of it? How can we work to address that so that we can reconnect with a positive vision of ourselves, to fall in love with ourselves again, see us as somebody who's whole and worthy and capable. And if we are ever triggered, again, being able to call out where that's coming from, having a greater sense of awareness of where some of these internal pains come from, and then also being mindful of the consequences. Okay, so maybe a milkshake certainly is not as bad as some other things that I could have done to escape that mental moment at that time, but it's relatively much better for me. And it didn't add to my physical health or my well-being at the time, but it didn't detract so much from it that I need to kind of worry about it. And I thought this was an important kind of insight to have, because what I've seen with a lot of individuals, if they have either a return to use or if some new behavior comes in that's also destructive and creates consequences that they don't like, what I hate to see is somebody be triggered, go through another challenge, respond in a way that they're not happy about, and then that starts this new downward spiral. I very well could have woken up the next morning and said and shamed myself or guilted myself over that milkshake that took me off my diet or affected my nutrition for the day. And if I'd have done that, if I'd have chosen that approach, then that's very quickly could have created this kind of negative downward spiral of shame and guilt and
Escalated.
lack of self-worth. Right.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that's kind of what the other side might look like. It's becoming aware of the triggers, aware of the costs and consequences, being regaining a sense of agency to take ownership of some of those things in our life, doing the work that we can in order to heal some of those wounds, and then being more in control. That Samson talks about the self-directed recovery. So kind of being more self-directed, regaining a sense of agency, really being in the driver's seat of our own life, not in the passenger seat on this chaotic roller coaster that is your life out of control, where you're not aware of what's driving you to do certain things. You're not really aware of, or you're trying to avoid or numb out the consequences that are apparent to you. So I don't know. There's a lot that I said that we could probably unpack there for a while, but I'd love to hear if anything
Well,
resonated there with you.
I mean, you said some great stuff, and it really resonated with me on how I look at a lot of stuff too, as far as addiction. And I love that you brought up, there's 40 million people out there that's battling some type of an addiction, right? Not all drugs and
Mhm.
alcohol. I mean, gosh, there's porn, there's gambling, there's eating, there's work, there's shopping. I mean, you named off a few yourself, and I loved how you talk about, you know, sitting with things. And I feel, at least my version is society has guilt us for some of us who want to sit in our emotions and figure things out, right? You took
Mhm.
that time when you dropped your daughter off. You're like, okay, now what am I going to do? And you're sitting here with your own thoughts and your emotions. And it's like, how do we deal with those? And I feel like a lot of individuals, that's why they go the direction that they go, right? Is because they don't know how to sit in their emotions. And it's
Right.
hard. It really is, because that's something I've been working on since I
Mhm.
took training 2 years ago, is learning how to sit with my emotions so I don't go back to snorting cocaine and drinking every weekend,
Mhm.
especially on the weekends if I don't have a lot of stuff to do. I mean, that was like my biggest thing, right? And then pretty soon I fell into that trap and I was doing it every single weekend for 8 years.
Right.
I've had to really learn how to sit with my emotions and
Mhm.
understand them. And then also learning to recognize the thoughts, which what you just mentioned quite a few times, is learning how to sit with our thoughts and recognize them and go, hey, wait a minute. However, if you do slip, you said something so amazing that a lot of people, of course, who battle the addiction that is being shamed, like the drugs and alcohol and things like that, and the porn, gambling, they get the guilt and shame thrown at them constantly from family members, friends, and it's just because they don't understand addiction, right? A lot of
Right.
people don't understand it. Even those that
Mhm.
are in the addiction don't understand it, but to be able to stop and go, okay, now wait a minute, I'm not going to shame myself. I had a guest on my show 5 years ago who had a porn addiction, and 2 decades he battled it, and he was actually going to commit suicide. He had enough of it. He didn't know what to do. And he come from a very religious family. It was
Mhm.
shameful for him to bring it out because of what his family may think of him. And he was actually on a business trip and he knew of a bridge and he drove to this bridge and he was getting ready to jump off this bridge. And he said a prayer before he did. And all of a sudden he heard this voice going, why don't you celebrate the days you don't use? And he was like, what? And it stopped him. And he started
Right.
thinking about it. He literally got back in his car, drove back to his hotel, called his wife, told his wife what was going on, flew her to his location. They sat in a hotel, I think he said, for like 2 days, and all they did was cry and talk and hug each other. And
Yeah.
he goes, at that time, I realized instead of beating myself up for the times I slip, I started celebrating the times I didn't. And he goes,
Right.
before I knew it, I was like 3 days, and then maybe I'd slip. And then all of a sudden it was like a week, and then I'd slip. Next thing I knew, it was 3 months. Next thing I knew, it was 8 months, and
Right.
he said, so I learned how to celebrate the days that I didn't than the days that I did, and not
Right.
celebrate or beat
Right.
myself up. And I found that to be so cool. And I like to bring that up every once in a while because really we do. Instead of beating ourselves up, we should celebrate and get right back on the horse again, right?
Right.
But again, it also takes time. And
Hmm.
not everyone, especially here in Salt Lake, we got an amazing recovery community. We really, really do. However, there's certain ones out there that feel if you don't do it my way, you're doing it the wrong way. This is the
Yeah.
way you do it, and that's it. And it's not true because we all have so many different paths. And, it is about changing behavior, possibly, yeah.
Hmm.
And some can go that direction. Some needs to be hard knocks. You need to be in their face and it works. Others, they curl up in a ball and it just
Right.
makes you use even more, right? They need a different path. And sometimes
Right.
they do have to have other crutches like medical assistant treatment or microdosing or things.
Hmm.
However, if it gets them to the healing where they need to be, at least my version of it, I feel it's okay because what gives me the right to tell somebody that's working for them that they're doing it wrong? That's
Right.
that's not my place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I wanted to mention. And I maybe I made it clear, but to me, that's what I envision the other side of addiction to look like. That would be how I would define recovery. But just to your point, like I think that it's not up to us to define what anybody else's recovery is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
We all come into it and we all take different pathways into it, and maybe we all have different destinations in mind for what we want the other side of that to look like. And that's a big challenge that I see also, and I've seen is that individuals saying, "No, if you're not doing it my way, you're not doing it right," or if you're not being successful, you must not just want it enough. Therefore, let me ratchet it up a bit and pour on some more shame and some more guilt. Let's spend a little bit more time on your step four, and let's talk about all the things that are bad about you. Maybe that's going to be the motivation. And in reality, it's some um, I guess in a dark way, I guess you could call it humorous. It's humorous to think that some other individual is going to out shame or out guilt me. Like there's nothing that you can say to me that's going to be worse than something that I've said to myself. So this idea that you're going to add a little bit more shame and guilt onto the scale and somehow that's going to make a difference, it's a little absurd to think of it that way when you look at it. But that same scale, and to your point with this, this kind of quick mindset shift of of cultivating that kind of recovery mindset of choosing to look at the same things but a different way has a drastically different result. I think it was Wayne Dwyer said, when you change the way that you look at things, the things that you look at change. So
Mm.
this individual was looking at his problematic behavior and he was only considering the cost and the shame and the guilt and the frustration and the lack of agency that he had, in the decisions. That's only adding onto that side of the scale that's deepening that emotional wound. That's just, that's continuing to aggravate this scab that you have or this wound that's trying to heal, and you're only cutting yourself deeper, which is only making that craving or that desire to get out of that state even greater. But if we can start to put some chips on the other side of the scale and change that mindset, that perspective. Okay, let me look at the number of days that I've done what I've followed through. I've done well. I've done what I wanted to do, because then that begins to shift the way that you see yourself. And there's a lot of challenges that people face in recovery. And a major obstacle that I've seen is individuals, when they start a recovery journey and things start to improve in their life, if their self-image hasn't improved, then they often think that they don't deserve good things to happen. So when they go find that new job, when they start that new relationship, when people in their family start to treat them differently, they're not used to that. And if you don't feel like you're deserving of that, then very quickly you're going to self-sabotage and you'll do something to get back to the chaos that you remember, because the way that you see yourself, that's what you deserve.
Well, and it's
So I
comfortable,
am
it's comfortable for
right,
them as well, right? It's what they know.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people don't realize that chaos and discomfort can be comforting. I mean, any change can be uncomfortable. Anytime we get out of our familiar zone, that's going to be uncomfortable. And sometimes, and that there's yeah, you see this with a lot of individuals. They just go into chaotic environments and chaotic situations, and sometimes people's drug of choice will change to another thing that can create some chaos or some drama in their life because that's what they're familiar with. But I think it all stems from this vision that we have of ourselves. So one of the things that I often do with individuals, as a recovery coach and I lead a recovery residence, one of the first things that I'll have somebody do is I'll ask them to make a list of 100 wins and successes that they've had in their life. And the normal response that I get is like deer in the headlights. Like, what are you talking about? I'm 30, I'm 40 years old. I haven't had 100 wins or successes, obviously. That's why I'm kind of stuck in this place. Well, to me, that's a litmus test, or that's an indicator of their self-estimate, of their self-esteem, of how they see themselves at the time. And there's some reasons for this, and we can talk about kind of our survival lens and how that influences the way that we see ourselves. But first and foremost, if somebody can't think of 100 wins or successes they've had in their life, it's because they've been spending so much time living in this world that's defined by their failures and their defects. Well, if your sum of your self-worth is just the sum of all the failures and defects that you've had, that's not going to be a very good picture. So that is going to lead to a lot more of those aggravated emotional wounds that tend towards certain behaviors to deal with it. Um, so I always encourage people to do that. It's a list that I've made many times in my life, but for me, it's just a reminder of like, because I don't care how old you are and how many mistakes that you've made. If you're 10 years old, you've got not just 100, but thousands of wins and successes. Especially if we're willing to give ourselves credit for a win or a success that is small and seemingly so insignificant, but is of equal magnitude of a mistake that we might have made yesterday, and we'll continue to hold that over ourselves for, days or weeks to come. So, writing this list of things, it might start as I learned how to walk, I learned how to crawl, learned how to ride my bike, learned how to tie my shoes. This is reminding us that regardless of the mistakes that we've made or the trouble that we've been through, there's also a lot of good and beautiful things about us. It's reminding ourselves, okay, even though I used my drug of choice these last 4 days, there's also been 30 days in the last, 6 months that I didn't do it. So where you choose to focus your mind and your attention is going to have some really significant and real effects on the way that you feel and the way that you see yourself. And if addiction manifests in any behavior that helps ease some kind of internal pain, then bringing some awareness to not just what are those triggers, but a fair awareness and a fair assessment to the way that we're willing to see ourselves, that can go a long way in beginning to repair that. And I think we if emotional trigger happens and it's a very steep decline into pits of despair and emotional pain, then one of the things that we can work on in our recovery is trying to lessen that dip, trying to expand the resilience that we have and try to lessen the emotional pain that comes when one of those soft points is touched. And I think and that's something that we can work on in time. And maybe that's what the other side of addiction looks like, is softening that sine wave so that our life experience is not just highs and then very deep lows that we try to get out of through some substance or behavior, but allowing those lows to not go down as far, not cut as deeply, not trigger as much emotional pain in us, so that we have the capacity to kind of change the behaviors or change the response that we have. And then not tacking on more guilt and shame. So when I went and had that milkshake, I didn't just sulk and beat myself up and say that I was worthless. And of course, I was never going to change, and I was always going to struggle with things beyond my control. But I was able to just give myself a little bit of grace. Because one thing that I believe that's true, and this was shared with me, and the more that I've contemplated this and considered this, what I find to be true about every human's behavior at any time is that every person is simply doing the best that they can at the time with the limited resources, energy, awareness, or options that they have at their disposal. For one, this can help us give a little bit of grace to ourselves. Like, yeah, maybe I didn't want to do that thing yesterday, but if I wasn't so exhausted, if I'd had another option available to me, if I'd had awareness of a better way to deal with that situation, then I could have done something different, but it wasn't available to me at the time. If I want to not make that decision again in the future and repeat that behavior, well, then let me build up my capacity to make different decisions in the future. Um, yeah, so I'll pause there for a second before I go down another rabbit hole.
Well, and it's about giving our own selves the empathy, right? It's we're so good at giving our empathy or sympathy. I like to use the word empathy to
Mhm.
someone else, but when it comes to ourselves, we continue to beat ourselves up.
Right.
And one thing I've learned even through my training, our subconscious mind, it takes file of everything that's happened to us in our life, and
Yeah.
and it's there to protect us, but really it's doing more harm to us than it is protecting us.
Mhm.
It's doing its job, but when we start learning how to also listen to our subconscious, at least it's worked for me. It's
Mhm.
worked for me knowing that when certain thoughts pop up or certain things that may feel like a trigger or something to me, it's like, okay, wait a minute. I know exactly why this is happening.
Right.
Right. So now I have that opportunity to make a different choice,
Right.
right? And as we continue to do that, we start firing healthier neurons, of course.
Hmm.
And the stronger we fire, the more it resonates with us.
Right.
And it's just being able to start recognizing a lot of that. I read a book a couple times called The Conscious Creator, and that
Hmm.
that really helped me realize a lot of where my thoughts were coming from. And I realized after reading that book, the majority of my thoughts during the day were all negative thoughts,
Right.
instead of positive ones. Like looking
Hmm.
out, I mean, looking out my window and seeing our beautiful Wasatch Mountains. I mean, they're just
Right.
gorgeous, right? Especially during the spring, because sometimes we get a little bit of white snow up there and you still got the green, or even in the fall, you got the color with a little bit of, I mean, there's so many things like going to the hundred winds, right? I look at that as a win because I'm able to see it.
Right.
So yeah,
And that's the thing, and I'm part of the recovery journey. So this is what I was talking about with that kind of lens of survival or protection, which helps me really understand how things cascade and how we can get stuck in that kind of negative mindset place. So I understand that first and foremost, our bodies and all of its design is designed for self-preservation. So a lot of the motivations that we have, a lot of the behaviors that we have, it's really to make sure that, to ensure our survival. So one of the ways that this affects us is we tend to have a natural negativity bias. We tend to see and understand or observe or witness things that could become potential threats as a means of helping ensure our survival. This can be external things. This can be things that we see in our environment around us, things that we see in individuals. Maybe, maybe behaviors or clues that somebody doesn't like me and maybe they're a potential threat. We tend to clue in more to those things than the opposite because, again, we're hardwired for preservation first. So if all we're doing is sitting around and seeing the beautiful things, then we're not going to be aware of this threat that comes and takes us out. This lens that we see, and one way that I think about it is, especially once we're triggered or once we're in that fight or flight state or once we're in that survival mode, we have a brilliant uh, neurosystem and we have a brilliant sum of different senses that allow us to observe and get data about things that are going on in our environment around us between our five or six senses if we want to talk about some the instinct that we might feel. But the challenge is all of these senses are constantly flooding our awareness with much more data than we could ever possibly utilize. So with this self-preservation aspect or element of our brain or of our awareness, one of the things that it does is it will filter out a lot of this data that comes through to our awareness if we deem that it's not important information for us to have right now. I had a mentor where he said, if I asked you right now to be aware of the sensation in your left foot, well, then you could bring your awareness down to the sensation in your left foot. Maybe it's hot, cold, sweaty. Maybe there's a pain, maybe some numbness. That data was always there for minutes leading up to it, but you weren't aware of it because it wasn't deemed important to you at the time. Similarly, two people can be in the same environment. One person is more aware of the beautiful snow-capped mountains and the sound of the birds chirping, or another person who's been triggered and now in that fight or flight state, the only thing that they're scanning for is things that are potential threats. So that can happen externally, it can happen in our environment. It can also happen internally. One of the reasons that we have more of a negativity bias toward the way that we see ourselves is if you had a major win or accomplishment yesterday, if you were to repeat whatever behavior allowed you to have that win or accomplishment, if you were to repeat that tomorrow, that's not going to threaten your survival or your well being. However, if you made a mistake yesterday, if you have a certain identified weakness or character defect, if you repeat certain behaviors, those could become potential threats in the future. So one way I think about my awareness or my consciousness is like a Google Chrome browser with 50 open tabs at all times. And I want to only be aware of, I only want to have tabs open if it's important for me. So that means that if I have a win or a success, I'm going to close that tab out because a repeat of that win or success, that's not going to threaten my survival. However, if I made a mistake yesterday, if I didn't follow through on something, if I let somebody down or let myself down, or I didn't complete something I wanted to, if I continue to repeat that behavior, it's going to threaten my overall well being and my opportunities, my mental and emotional well being. So I'll become aware of that and I'll leave that browser tab open. Well, as we go through life, if we're only leaving these browser tabs open that represent the defects or the mistakes or the setbacks that we've had, then pretty soon this lens through with which we experience and look at ourselves is only going to be defined through those, through those negative elements. This is why I think, this is why, back we are negatively biased, or we have a negativity bias or cognitive bias in many ways. And I think it all comes back to this. So that could be our initial state. That could be the way that we're designed in our natural hardwiring, especially if you've been in this fight or flight state for a period of time. If you've been living in a chaotic, life for a period of time, you can be very prone to these deep negative biases or perspectives. But it doesn't mean that we can't bring some intention in and change that a little bit. One of the ways I describe it is if you are, if you're looking out, say we're outside. I see you're an outdoorsman. You like to be outside, so you're outside. You're hearing the sounds of the birds chirping, maybe the wind blowing, the rustling the trees. You're seeing the snow-capped mountains. You're maybe hearing some friends, or you feel the sense of some friends that you're outside with. Well, if all of a sudden you hear a loud noise, maybe some gunfire, and you have no idea where it came from, but it sounded pretty close. Or maybe there's a bear walks around the corner. Now all of a sudden you're in this fight or flight state. All these beautiful things are still going on around you, but all of your awareness is simply focused on that bear and maybe some other bush that a bear might sneak out of that could be a threat to you. In one way to think about that is our lens of perspective. So if you've ever looked through a telescopic lens on a camera, then if you twist it, you can really kind of zoom in. So there might be a lot of things around you, but once you're triggered, once you're in that fight or flight state, we tend to zoom in just on negative things. So now if you're looking through that lens and you zoomed in on that bear, it would seem to you like your whole world, everything that you're aware of is just that bear, just that potential threat. So this really creates or influences the way that people are experiencing their life and experiencing themselves if they're really zoomed in on, if they're only filtering through some of the negative things because they're stuck in this survival state. Well, in that recovery journey and what the other side of that addiction might look like is softening that lens. Let's expand that lens. We're not denying that there's some threats there. We're not saying that we're denying some defects that we have or mistakes that we've made, but we're also going to allow some room to be aware and mindful of some of the positive things that are also true. When you're out there in the wilderness, there's also still the snow-capped mountains and the birds chirping and the wind rustling the trees, even though that bear is present. If you're looking internally, we're not saying that you didn't make mistakes. We're not saying that you don't have some weaknesses or some character defects to be mindful of, but we are also willing to acknowledge and be mindful of many of the wins and successes and the strengths that we have. We're not just looking at the days that we used, we're also recognizing the days that we didn't use. We're not just looking at the mistakes, but we're also bringing some awareness and some attention to some of the good things in our life. And in a the analogy I would understand it is we're zooming out to get a more fair and true representation of who we are and what our life looks like by allowing ourselves to also be mindful of many of the good things.
Yeah, I love how you put that, Garrett, because I was thinking of like some of my training. We use what we call a red line, green line, right? And we start
Mhm,
with the red line where this is life, it's a horizontal line, but the red line goes horizontal for a little bit and then it starts dipping and starts going down. And
mhm,
then as you ask people or clients or whatever, what's the worst thing that can happen to you, and
mhm.
it's crazy. The majority of the people say death, right? So you put death down at the bottom, but as you get them start to think, you could be, oh, I lost a child, or I lost a spouse, or I lost a job, or I'm getting a divorce, or I'm going to prison, or, and pretty soon you start realizing there's a lot worse things that can happen to you in your
Right.
life. And then
Mhm.
when you get to the green line, you're going horizontal. Then pretty soon the green line starts going up. Like what is some of the most amazing things that could happen to you, right? Oh, I could win the
Sure.
lottery, or I could meet the woman or the man of
Mhm,
my dreams, and
mhm.
and it really gets people thinking, going, oh my gosh, and I love how one goes up and the other goes down.
Mhm.
And I've said on my show many many times, my version of including myself for the majority of my life, I was looking at my life through a straw, like what you
Sure.
talked about with the lens, right?
Mhm.
We're just looking, we just see what's in front of us through that straw. I mean, when we're little kids, we think it's kind of cool, like a telescope, like her, or a telephoto lens. But when we split it,
Yeah.
when we split that straw, our vision widens and we start seeing things in such a
Mhm.
different way. And I love how you even put it, right? It's we are so quick to beat ourselves up.
Mhm.
And instead of looking at such the huge wins, because there are so many huge wins out there on a daily basis, and until we can start changing our mindset,
Yeah.
we don't recognize them. And I know every day there's blessings that all of us go through every single freaking day, but we're so caught up in the negative part of things that we just completely bypass all that other stuff. And
Right.
it does take time, right? I mean, I'll work on this the
Well,
rest of my
first you got to kind of calm down and settle yourself and get out of that fight or flight state. So as you start to define that red line, you begin to real like it, it can be more triggering. Like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that can go bad, and then that really sticks you in that survival state. And then all of a sudden, like, the only thing you can think about are other negative things that might happen. So you get this big long list, and you're in this very, very deep hole because now you're in that survival state, that fight or flight state. Like you don't have the benefit of perception to see some of those positive things. So once you're guided through, or once you're allowed to zoom out and say, okay, yeah, we're not saying there's not some bad stuff down here, but now we're going to zoom out and see a full fair picture and look at all this beautiful stuff up on the top line too. Because as you zoom in on all that red stuff, then it can feel like, man, my whole life is just defined by the horrible things that might happen, and the horrible things that are the horrible things about me, or the horrible things about my past. And if you get stuck there long enough, this is where people lose hope, and they just say, all right, I'm just going to use until my last day, or maybe I'm just going to accelerate this thing and take myself out. And it's understandable, because if everything that you see and understand in that moment, just from the triggered state that you are, everything seems negative, and you're stuck there for long enough, you might completely lose hope that things can change. So that's why I love, that kind of approach, or anything that we can do first and foremost. And one of the things I always find very important is to help calm somebody's nervous system down a little bit, so that they can have the benefit of that prefrontal cortex, so they can have the ability to rationalize and to identify some of those positive things. Because I think in many ways, if we're too triggered, we're too agitated, we don't have access to think about those things, because our mind is only wanting to help us, preserve our survival at that time. So one of the things I found so helpful for that is just, and it's so simple that it seems like it shouldn't be as effective as it is, but simply sitting with somebody and being with them, and then guiding them through like a diaphragmatic breath, like a 4-7-8 breath, or anything that, for a couple of repetitions, I found in 1 minute that can calm somebody down to the point where they feel completely relaxed, completely present. And there's nothing else, even, pharmaceuticals, that can do something as effective as quickly and as universally for so many people. I've had coaching clients, or potential coaching clients, reach out to me, and they were very triggered when they called me, and then I would just say, hold on, let me just try something for a minute, and I'd lead them through, a quick 4, 7, 8. And one girl, she burst into tears. She's like, I've never felt so much inner peace in years. I can't remember feeling this way since the last time I used. It's because she was in that survival state, and everything about her perception and her life was just ratcheting up and driving her deeper and deeper into that red, so that she couldn't even, she was so agitated, and so much tension and so much stress, that she was just normalizing and now becoming numb to, that she didn't realize how stressed she was. Well, I think that can be true for a lot of us, if we're not doing things to regularly kind of dissolve that and bring us back and ground us. But I think that's a very important thing to do. And this is where, there's a lot of great advice and a lot of great tools and a lot of great things out there, but also being mindful of, somebody's got to be in the right place to be able to leverage and use some of those tools. You can't talk to somebody the morning after they wake up from a huge binge or a bender, and have some of these conversations, because they're still stuck in that survival mode, or they're ratcheting up with their own guilt and shame at that time, and not really able to access the parts of their wisdom and their awareness, or their truth, to see things a little bit differently, in a way that will help them, in a way that's not just compounding the pain that they're in and driving the next use.
Yeah. Breath work, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Garrett, too, because breath work is so helpful, right? It is amazing where your body can take you when you settle yourself down. I've
Right.
got a couple lady friends that do a class every month, and they do the breath work that is very, very intense. I mean, you are breathing quick. It's like running a marathon laying down for an
Yep.
hour, you know, and
Yep.
some of the stuff that has happened to me, and the visions and stuff that I've seen when you're inhaling that much oxygen into your body,
Right.
it's so helpful. I mean, it's so helpful. And I've got a good friend, Dr. Rob Kelly, that is in Texas. He has the Breath Box studio, and
Right.
they are seeing a 99.9% success rate, and it's with all types of things, right? Depression,
Hmm.
anxiety, addiction, eating.
Yeah.
I mean, so many different things. And he's training a gentleman that I know here in Salt Lake who runs a recovery called Diamond Recovery in
Yeah.
Ogden, Salt Lake City, and he's starting to use that now in his recovery because it is so helpful. I mean,
Right.
it can calm you down so quick and help you
And then
realize.
when you're doing it that way, and I've done a couple sessions also where it's about an hour of this very, deep and accelerated breath, and the things that it, from what I understand, and it's kind of supported by The Body Keeps the Score, the book The Body Keeps the Score, is that we have emotions, and if we don't process them at the time, then we just bottle them up in our body. And if we're so engaged on just kind of getting back to life or taking care of the next task, over a lifetime, we've accumulated a whole bunch of stuff that's not serving us, but is certainly having negative implications on the way that we feel and the way that we're showing up. And that's one of the beautiful things about breath work. It's a non-clinical, tool that anybody has access to that can use it to release some of these things. I've been doing long sessions, and sometimes I'll start laughing, and I don't know what that is. Some people would say, "Oh, that's some laughter that you suppressed before, and now you've given it, permission to kind of come up." And then 2 minutes later, I'm sobbing and I'm hysterical, and that's, some people would say that that's some sadness or some repressed emotions that were locked in. But it's always very profound. And I'll tell you, there was one session I did, and this was at a retreat center down in Costa Rica. We're about an hour into it, and I took this long inhale, and I was just holding my breath. My whole body felt like it floated off, and I was, kind of hovering around. And I said after that, I said, if somebody was looking at me and they told me that somebody came up and injected some drug into my foot that I wasn't aware of right at that time, I would completely believe them. Because the kind of the peace and everything that I felt for that time, I was like, I didn't know that a human body could experience this, and I didn't know if I'd made myself transition and I wasn't coming back. It was quite a unique experience. But I also like to point out that there's some very simple things that are much more accessible and people can use anytime throughout any day, to help calm themselves down. And maybe it's a good opportunity to kind of unpack this, but even the 4-7-8 breath that I described. So inhaling deeply and fully in through your nose for 4 seconds, holding that for 6 or 7 seconds, and then a long, slow exhale through your mouth. That's something I'll do all the time. Do it, if I'm about to give a presentation, I can do it. I love it because you can do it when you're talking to somebody. If you start to feel some anxiety or tension build up in your body, nobody knows that you're doing it unless they're really astute and watching watching and counting your lungs as you inhale and exhale. But one of the reasons it's so profound is because it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So when we talk about the nervous system, we talk about the sympathetic. That's the thing that activates, that pushes us into fight or flight to help us respond to things that are going on. If you're looking at it from a neurobiological perspective, one of the things that they say happens when you're triggered is, in many ways, the big beautiful part of your brain that allows you to see everything, kind of truthfully and assess everything. We talk about this prefrontal cortex. There are, our latest and most highest developed part of our brain that gives us executive function and the ability to assess situations and think about and consider risks or potential outcomes. In many ways, if once we're triggered, that really goes offline. One of the reasons that happened, again, back to self-preservation. Our body is hardwired for self-preservation. So this big, beautiful part of our brain that makes us the apex on this planet and allows us to do so many wonderful things, it also consumes a tremendous amount of energy. And compared to other parts of our brain, it also operates extremely slowly. I mean, we're talking, milliseconds versus, nanoseconds, but very slow compared to other parts of our brain. So in our hardwiring design, if we are, if that bear jumps out of the woods, we don't want to use all of our cognitive capacity and consume unnecessary energy to get out of that. We're just going to go do something so quick to flee that situation and ensure our survival. So I share this because when we are triggered, there's a lot of things that we don't have access to help us see and assess things and talk clearly about things and be aware of where certain thoughts came from and what messages they might be able to tell us. If we're triggered, we don't have access to that capacity in our brain at the time. So what I used to understand was, once we're triggered and once this prefrontal cortex goes offline and now we're operating by our amygdala or our lower portions of our brain, as we're the limbic system, as we're trying to survive. What I used to understand was that once you're triggered, you kind of got to ride it out. Like, there's nothing to do but just kind of wait for some time to pass until your body calms down and you get back to a comfortable place where you can regain access to the full capacity of your brain. And the reason I understood that is because the part of your brain that could communicate, oh no, that's not actually a snake on the ground, it's actually a rope, or, that's not actually, you're actually not a failure because you did this thing. You were just doing the best time that you could at the time. Let's celebrate the wins, not look at the losses. The part of your brain that can communicate those kind of thoughts is really effectively offline at that time that you're triggered. So if you don't have, if that's offline, then you can't communicate that thought that, oh, everything's fine, let's just calm down. So I used to understand that to be true, that you just had to simply wait a period of time till you naturally calm down. You can, remove yourself from people, places, and things, change environment, and hope that things calm down. But what I've since come to understand is that we can actually communicate with that limbic system, with the amygdala, when we're agitated, when we're triggered. We can communicate with it by reversing some of the natural things that happen once we get triggered. So anytime we're triggered, one of the things that happens to prepare ourselves to fight or to flee is that our respiration rate changes, our blood pressure increases a little bit to bring some more oxygen to to our muscles and extremities, so we can fight with with whatever it is that we need to contend with. Our respiration rate changes, our heart rate changes, some other physiological things happen in order to prepare us to fight or flight. So the beautiful thing is if we're mindful of it, or if we can have the support of somebody to remind us and walk us through it, we can actually communicate by simply reversing that natural change that happens when we get triggered. So if you get triggered and your natural changes, I'm taking these deep inhales to bring a lot of oxygen into my body to help my muscles prepare to fight or flee, then we can change that and do a shorter inhale and a longer exhale. This reverses that breath rhythm. And when it reverses that breath rhythm, it's communicating to your limbic system or your amygdala that, oh, the threat is past, we can calm down. So that's why it's so effective, because it's really helping somebody's internal nervous system regulate at a time where they don't have the capacity to regulate themselves.
Yeah, it's like recalibration. You see animals in the
Right.
wild do it all the time,
Right.
right?
They'll
If you
do it.
like
They'll
watch,
shake. They'll do something. Yep.
yeah, like if you watch, National Geographic, where, you know, a hyena or something is chasing a zebra or lions or whatever,
Right.
and they escape,
Right.
luckily, and you'll watch and they go through the shiver, or you see ducks
Yeah.
do it, they'll
Yeah.
quack quack and flap their wings and jump around a little bit, and then they just go on floating like they're just minding
Right.
their damn business, like nothing happened, you
That's
know.
right.
With
Yeah.
humans, though, we sit in that, we live in that, we
Yeah.
take it and we grasp onto it. But
Yeah.
like you said, when we can use these little teeny tools, it makes such a big difference to help ground us again and recalibrate us to get to where we can actually start thinking a lot clearer again instead of going in the opposite direction.
Yeah. So that's what the other side of addiction would look like, is
Yes.
being mindful of the triggers, being aware of the behaviors or what that craving might be, and what the message might be telling us, and then having more control about how we decide to react or respond to that trigger, and then spending more time in that calm state where where we have the capacity to begin to look at and to address some of those sources of pain in our life, so that hopefully we can process that, we can release it, we can work through it, we can get some help for it, so that those triggers and those pains that come up, it's not as deep a trough. It's not cutting you 6 inches deep. Maybe now it's just kind of giving you a little nick on the surface, so that the thing that you reach for, and I think this is why it's important, therefore, the thing that you reach for might not have the same negative consequences. I reached for a milkshake instead of a bottle of whiskey. That didn't have the severity of the consequences that it could have and that it would have had in the past, because I'd, kind of done the work and been helped and been supported to the place where I had, yeah, more agency in my own human experience. I'll mention this and I'll share a link with you for your show notes. But I created a link on my website called Show Notes, and I'll send you the URL. But one of the things in there, if any listeners want to check it out, is I have something that's called the Warrior Reset. And it's 4 practices that I found to be most effective and help people in any stage of their recovery to gain a little bit of a spiritual or an emotional or a mental reset. And one of the things that is included on there, it's 4 daily practices. You can do all 4 of them in less than 15 minutes a day, but it's the things that I found to be most efficacious and helpful for somebody at any stage in their life or in their recovery. One of the things on there is that diaphragmatic breath. And for anybody that checks it out, there's a recorded track where you can listen to it. Because, like I said, we need to at least have the capacity to be able to remind ourselves how to do it. I've had people call me before when they're severely triggered, and they're like, "Hey, man, you do that breath thing? I can't remember it. Like, I can't even recall it right now. I can't walk myself through it. Can you guide me through it?" So that's one of the I created a recorded track. So if you can't access that knowledge at the time, then if you have a link to it or the little MP3, then for some individuals, they can just listen to that. And I've had some coaching clients that set a reminder to listen to that a few times a day just to make sure that they're not ratcheting up the stress and anxiety as they go through the day. So I offer that. And then there's three other daily practices that I highly encourage people to do. It's all free. You can go check it out if you go to the link on my website, or you can go specifically for that tool. You can go to thewarriorreset.com for anybody that's listening, but I'll provide a link so everybody can go find it.
Yeah, please. Yes, just so I don't want to type it in the notes wrong. So I want to make sure that's
Sure.
right. So yeah, if you shoot that over to me in an email, I'll make sure it gets in there. That's for sure. Now, and I don't know how far you want to go into this, Garrett, too, and we're getting close to the hour, but you know, both of us, we have battled with our addiction stuff, right? We've both gone there, and you see so many people that have gone through that who have got their lives back on track, and it's so cool to see individuals like yourself who've gone, you know what, this is the direction I'm going to start taking my life. There's other things, there's a better life out there for me, and
Hmm.
you took your time to figure it out, right? You found what worked for you, and you got yourself out of it. So I just want our listeners to know, Garrett's just not talking because he went to school and learned all this stuff. I mean, he's educated himself, as you can tell. However, he's gone through his battles too. And that's what makes him so good at what he does, and because it's hard for individuals. I've had people, I was talking to my daughter the other day, and she says, yeah, Dad, some people are telling me this and telling me that. And it's like, well, have they ever gone through that? And she's like, no. And it's like, well, how do they know how to give you the advice? Right.
Hmm.
And you've got people who have gone through it and fought through it and found different ways. And again, that I think is so cool because nowadays there are so many different ways that people can get help now to get them
Hmm.
through whatever it is that they're going through, right?
Yeah.
Before it was AA or other different types of things, and I'm not knocking them down by all means at all because they've saved millions and thousands of
Yeah.
millions of people, right? It's just that there's so many different ways out there now, and it's going more into the mind, which I
Hmm.
think is really cool. We're starting to learn more about how the brain works and what triggers it and how it fires. And because of the studies and that are people are doing, I mean, I love listening to Dr. Gabor. I mean, he is so
Yeah.
freaking amazing of how he views things and looks at things, and it makes so much sense.
Right. That's
So
one of those, every time I listen to him, I'm like, man, that's a truth. Like I felt that, but I hadn't heard it articulated like that. And I didn't realize other people were seeing that. So it kind of confirms or validates things that I had, at least suspected at a time. But yeah, he brings so much clarity to it. You touched on a couple things there. So for one advice, and this is kind of a mindset thing. So we're very prone to the advice and the assumptions and the thoughts and the beliefs of other individuals. And back to this survival state, we're much more attuned with the criticisms that other people might have or that we fear they might have. We can become more mindful of that, and then it can have some negative implications on the way that we show up or the way that we feel about ourselves. There's one bit of advice that I heard once, and I always try to remind myself of this. If you wouldn't go to that individual for advice, then don't accept their criticism. If you don't value that person's experience or their understanding or their knowledge enough about a certain, situation, if you don't value it enough that you would go to that person for advice, then don't allow yourself to be prone to any of the criticism that you might fear that they have for you. I think this is a really helpful thing when, for especially people in recovery, that we're always up against the thoughts and the stigmas and the feelings that other people have, and we'll accept a lot more pain or a lot more poison or punishment from individuals that we also recognize at the same time that they don't have the experience or the knowledge or the understanding that we value enough that we would even go to them for advice. So it's just something I like to offer for people to, kind of assess, hey, is this person saying or thinking something that makes me feel a bad way about myself? And if so, can I kind of reflect on, what's the other perspective here? Like, I don't want to live a life like them. I don't like their values and their beliefs and the way that they're showing up in X, Y, and Z. So therefore, maybe I shouldn't give any credence to the criticism that they have or that they might have. And then another thing I like to share. So my pathway to recovery is very unique. So I didn't go and seek help for a specific substance or behavior. Fortunately, at some of my darkest moments, I was connected with a coach and a mentor that began to work with me and actually help me heal and heal some of the wounds and fill some of that void inside of me, which was my greatest source of pain. So through that experience, this is something that's I think's given me some valuable insight because that wasn't a traditional pathway to recovery, yet there was so much I gained from it that really helped me. And that's inspired me to bring a lot of um, uh, outside of the industry knowledge and tools and awareness into introducing that to individuals in recovery because I think it can be so helpful. But what it also really helped me appreciate was, as you talked about, so many different pathways to recovery. So I run an addiction recovery residence. It's a long-term non-clinical facility. We have 16 residents there right now. We do have an in-house curriculum that brings some mindset and some personal growth material to them, but we don't demand a specific pathway to recovery when it comes to treatment or support groups because I want individuals to find what works best for them. I'm not for or against any tool or pathway or modality that's out there if it helps somebody. What I am against is somebody being forced into something that's not the right fit for
Yeah.
their combination of biopsychosocial, influences and their values and belief system. So I always encourage individuals that I talk to, if you feel like you're not getting what you need, if this support group or this home group is not really, it's not really jiving with you, well, then go find something else that does. Like there is going to be a solution or a combination of solutions out there that really fits your needs and helps you. But I always share that advice with the caveat that you got to be honest with yourself. Is the reason that this group or this clinical professional, the reason that it's kind of rubbing you the wrong way because you don't want to see yourself and you don't want to do the work? Or is it because that's just not the right fit for what you need at the time? So, I share that with the caveat to, be honest with yourself at least. And then another thing, a lot of people ask me, so I started talking about my pathway to recovery. And earlier in my profession, after I retired from the Marine Corps, I was certified as a human potential coach and trainer. And it was really, preparing me not to work with the addiction recovery community as much as it was just more general life and human performance coaching. So when I share that, some people often ask me, so why do you choose to work with people in addiction recovery? Like you could work with anybody. Why would you want to work with this group of people with these problems that they have? And the answer I always have is that I think of life a lot like a pendulum. And I think the further that that pendulum swings into the despair and the pain and the heartache and and just the pain that addiction or active use can bring into somebody's life, the farther it swings into the pain, the greater the potential it has to swing in the other direction of determination, of compassion, of passion and contribution and certainly of love and support of other individuals. So that's why I love working with this population. Not only do I have the lived experience that gives me some insight and hopefully some valuable information to share, but I see the ROI that you get from working with somebody that's battling their internal demons is so much greater than the return that you can experience or witness in somebody's life that hasn't gone through that.
Yeah. Amen to that. Yeah, it does. And at least it has for me, especially even doing this show, it has helped me in my life. You
Right.
know, I want to help as many people as possible. However, I think at the same time, in a selfish way, it's helping me more than it's helping them. And it's helping me grow. And that's what's
Hmm.
cool about it, right? You've taken your demons and now you're doing your best to
Hmm.
help other individuals see the light on the other side, but at the same time, you're also
Right.
growing, you know? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And there's some reasons for that, and I'll share a little. We'll unpack that for a second, or as long as you like to. But one of the things I understand is that through this service, through connecting with and serving individuals that have some experience or similar experience, one of the beautiful things that it helps us do is find some coherence between the skills and the insight and the awareness that we gained through our journey in the darkness. It allows us to leverage those skills for service of other individuals. And in many ways, this helps us ease the pain of those bad experiences that we've had in the past. It's looking at it not just at what did this experience take from me, but what did this darkness, what did this bad experience also give to me? So, it's the other side of the same coin. Every experience is going to have a cost, but it can also have a benefit. So this helps us become more connected to and aware of and mindful of the things that we gain through our darkest times, so that we're not just looking back on things that happened in the past and maybe grateful that we escaped it and sitting in remorse or shame or guilt because of the consequences of that time or that experience, but we get to sit more in the gratitude of the benefits that it provided to us. and realizing, especially if we can connect the dots, that who I am today and what I'm able to do and the ways that I'm able to serve others, I couldn't have done it had I not gone through that darkness myself. So I think this really kind of closes that loop, and ultimately what I'd love people to get to is to be grateful for all of the pain that they experienced in their life and the maladaptive coping mechanisms that they used, and maybe even find a little bit more grace for some of the pain that we cause in other people, because we see it in the perspective of really of a higher purpose and you know a greater, you know, the full landscape of our life, not just that chapter of our life.
I love how you put that, Garrett. Seriously, I was just talking to somebody actually 2 days ago that I said kind of the same thing. I says, we find our brightest light in the darkness of our dark.
Mhm.
And I've shared this on the show a few times. Last year I was really struggling with some stuff. I had a below the knee amputation, and I lost my wife, and I decided to go to a park and sit next to a river for a bit and just kind of collect my thoughts and feel my feelings, right? Sit with my emotions, as we talked about at the beginning
Mhm.
of the show. And I looked over by this river, and sometimes, we get a lot of snowpack up in the mountains, and the spring runoff gets pretty heavy. And we have a lot of rivers and different things that collect this water, right? That allow the water to come down. And at one time in this spot, it was probably getting some erosion, so they put slabs of concrete there, and standard concrete's 4 inches thick, and they stacked like six of these on top. However, they're not on top of each other anymore. They're separated. And
Mm.
down below, there was these two slabs that were just separated by a couple feet. And this tree trunk is coming out of it.
Oh wow.
This tree is going straight up. And I looked up and I'm seeing the sun coming through the leaves. And
Hmm.
all of a sudden it just hit me. And I hurry and packed up and hurry and headed home because I wanted to write on it. I jumped on my computer and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here looking at this and I'm like, at one time, it was just a little teeny root that slithered its way through those two slabs of concrete to
Hmm.
get to the sunlight. And now it has lifted those two slabs completely off of it,
Right.
right? And it's reached for the sun. And if we look at it as our life that same way, and I
Hmm.
love using the buffalo, and I'm actually looking at rebranding my show instead of AR, the other side of addiction, to um, towards the storm, or through the storm, towards the
Hmm.
storm. And it's because buffalo is the only animal on this planet that runs towards a storm, not away from it. They don't even find
Hmm.
shelter, they go towards it because it gets them through the storm quicker.
Right.
And I just love that whole analogy, and I
Yeah.
look at life that way. So it's like when I went through my challenges in 2025, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do like a buffalo. I'm just going to go towards the storm. I'm going to get through
Yeah.
this as quick as possible. I'm going to weather the storm. It's going to suck. It's going to be cold. It's going to be miserable, but I'm going to get through it a lot quicker than if I try to run away from it because it's just going to
Right.
follow and stay over
Right.
me. And so I love looking at that. It's crazy because nature can teach us so much as well, right?
Hmm.
I love looking around, as we talked about early in the show, opening our vision a little bit and looking at things in a broader aspect. And it's so cool to see things. I mean, our seasons go through change, right? I mean,
Right.
our universe is constantly changing and things. Well, so the hell can we, right? And
Right.
we can change ourselves to the better as long as we don't stay stuck, do our
Hmm.
best to recognize it and get out of that pattern, which you you mentioned today through the show number of times. And the way that you put things today was just so amazing. I mean, seriously, I just love how you look at it. And really, it's possible. We don't need to
Hmm.
stay in the dark. It's just how we change our mindset and the choices that we decide. And it doesn't happen overnight. People nowadays, people want that self gratification, like right now, right now, right now. But as
Right.
long as you're taking that step forward, it doesn't matter how big that step is. It could just be a little shuffle forward, but as long as we go, those steps get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Absolutely. And some days, if the best that we can do is not take a step backwards, then we can count that as a win also. But I
Absolutely.
love that. I love that the analogy of that buffalo and running into the storm. I mean, if we can do that more in our life and recognize, you know, we're going to suffer at times. There's no avoiding suffering in our life. So let's be in more control of that. So let's choose to lean into the challenges and the suffering. That can be a big barrier for people entering the recovery because I know it's going to suck. Well, let's lean into it. Let's have some agency of this and not continue to run away from it. Um, and then get the most that we can from it, or anything that shows up or happens in our life. Okay, you lost a job. Well, let's lean into it. Let's not run away from the feelings and the insecurities and the pain that it brings up and all the that's going to cascade into fears, and it's going to keep you stuck, and it's going to paralyze you and make it so you can't, make the next decision. Let's run into it so we can get to the other side of it more quickly.
Yeah. Amen. Garrett, thank you so much for your time today and for reaching out to me and asking to be on the show, man. It has been just an absolute pleasure to getting to know you and listen to your thoughts and your aspect on things. It's pretty cool because the more I do this show, the more and more people I'm finding like yourself who have actually widened their vision and
Hmm.
realized that there's so many different ways and so many different paths, and you touched on it so much today. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, for anybody that's listening, if you're finding yourself in a tough spot, if your life right now is in the darkness, then I want you to know first and foremost that you are lovable and acceptable just as you are. You are deserving of the greater joy and the internal peace and the happiness in your life, and it's possible for you. There's nobody that is in a situation now that can't be navigated through. There's no storm that's going on that somebody can't find the other side of, so long as you have the right support, the right tools. And sometimes the first thing that we need to do is believe that we are worthy and deserving of seeing the other side of that storm. So if you're doubting that for yourself right now, I just want you to know that you are lovable and acceptable just as you are. Maybe you've made some mistakes, but you've learned some things and you've picked up some things along the way. And there's ways that you can invest that in your own growth and in on surviving the storm and getting to the other side of it. So if you're doubting that, then know that I'm telling you, I'm the authority, and I'm telling you right now, and I'm sure I will echo this, that you are lovable and acceptable, and that there's a pathway for you to find the other side of that storm. So go looking for it. Go find the right tools, the resources, the coaches, the clinicians, the friends, the books, whatever it takes. Go seek that. Go seek the answers and find that path for yourself.
I love that. Great advice. And listeners, I'll make sure that I have all of Garrett's links that'll be on the show notes as well. So if you guys want to check out even Garrett and more stuff that he does, and take his little quiz thing and follow him, and um, again, we're here to support everyone, no matter what they do. He's a coach, I'm a coach, and sometimes people don't fit, right? So Garrett may be the guy that's for you. Just reach out to him if you guys see something that he has that you're looking for. I highly suggest. I mean, you guys heard him today on the show. He's got a lot of knowledge and a lot of great input. So Garrett, thank you so much again for taking time and being with us today. Really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure.
You bet. And I just want to say a huge shout out again to Emergo Academy, EMERGO Academy. Check out Dave and Susan. These guys are awesome. Check out their brain first approach. And guys, before we sign off here, mark your calendars, especially for those here in Salt Lake. Mark your calendars for Saturday, October 3rd. We've got our sixth Healing Utah Success Summit that is coming up. We've got some really great speakers. We've got Dr. Rob Kelly, who I mentioned on the show earlier. He's coming in from Texas to come up and talk. We also are talking to a doctor out of California who is actually interested in flying up to Salt Lake to be a part of this as well. So October 3rd, the Healing Utah Success Summit. You're going to start seeing a lot of that on my social media. We're going to leave you with this as we do at the end of every show, guys. Remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.